Perfect. Thank you so much, Jens, and thanks to Startup Grind for having me as a moderator today. I think a short intro is in order because it's important, as we said, to get to know each other when we are creating entrepreneurship communities. I'm Naimul, business advisor at Companion Stockholm. It's a national entrepreneurship advisory organization for startups, and I coach around 500 tech, impact, and cooperative startups every year. I'm also responsible for partnerships and events. Apart from that, I'm an early stage impact entrepreneur and investor, and I make music in free time. And very recently, as Jens was telling you, I've moved in as the new director for Stockholm chapter, and we have lots of interesting plans for the chapters and entrepreneurs in our Stockholm community. Well, that's me. Let's now move to interviewing Daniel. Daniel, a warm welcome to today's fireside chat on Startup Grind. I was going over Funded by Me's website yesterday. Impressive work. 66 million euros invested in companies, more than 250,000 registered members, several interesting campaigns like Chocolate Fabriken, Globe, and Wise Beauty. But before we move there, our audience would like to know a little bit about yourself. So if you could just tell us a little bit about you, your life, your interests, your focus as an entrepreneur, would love to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. So good morning to everybody. It's 10 o'clock in Sweden right now. We have a very crispy, cold autumn morning. Thank you for having me on this chat. I've been following Startup Grind for a bunch of years. I've given a few speeches, mostly physical. So it's interesting and see how effective this digital conference can work instead. So my background is that me and my co-founder Arno Smith, we've been running FundedByMe since 2011, since we had our first original idea. And we made a major pivot in 2012, 13, where we started to do equity crowdfunding, which was at that point very new in Europe. Crowdfunding at the end of the day is something we've done for hundreds of thousands of years. There's statistics showing that we are stronger together, that we are more forceful if we pool it together our resources. And a lot of companies that are successful today are in a way crowdfunded, even if it was 10 or 20 people only investing. So my background is a bit different from people in my segment. In Sweden, there's a stereotypical funding way where Swedish Swedish men from Stockholm who have the right background and the right school and the right name, they tend to be highest up on the hierarchy of getting funding. If you are a Swedish female with the right background and the right name and with a male co-founder, you already are 3 steps down on the stereotypical funding segment. And of course, if you are like me, born in a different country with a wrong name and a wrong background, a wrong education, obviously it's a bit tougher to raise money. But at the end of the day, what we have realized is that we are our own clients, and then that means that we understand what our clients need and what our clients are struggling with and their challenges. And I think that's why we also have succeeded this well, because we have a hunger and an underdog perspective rather than a top-down, non-hungry approach to startups. I strongly believe that every startup, every company needs to have a very strong why. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to build this? Because that gives you energy. It also gives you energy when your company struggles. You know, there's no straight way in building a company. There's always a lot of issues to deal with. Some are smaller, some are bigger. So a bit of my background. I was born in Romania, in Transylvania, in 1977. So I'm actually 43 years old. Came to Sweden as a 12-year-old. And I started my first career in arts, contemporary art. And this art piece on the wall here is actually something that I exhibited. That's a David Lynch art piece. So I was fairly successful in that segment and decided in 2008 to quit the art field, the producing of art field, and I went into web TV. I saw on a trip to Asia that web TV and the digital communication over the phones was pivoting. In 2008, a lot of people in Sweden just started to talk on smartphones, while in Japan in 2008, people weren't talking anymore. They were using it for content, video, and games and such. So for me, it was an eye-opener. And I did that for a few years. And then one of the projects that we funded in our own startup was a company called Ideas for Change, where we wanted to collect the video content on how to fix certain problems in the world, everything from pollution to racism to financial issues to a bunch of stuff. But the money ended in Ideas for Change in 2011, and that created a huge frustration for us because we realized that not only our idea couldn't be sustainable without funding, but we saw also a lot of great ideas stopped or being shut down just because of lack of funding. So me and my co-founder Arno, we said, what if we try to solve the funding bit and allow people to focus on what they're good at, which is building companies, changing the world, improving something, right? So we decided to try to solve that issue. We solved it by launching the first version of FundedByMe. But then we realized another gold mine, which was all these people who want to be part of the next big thing as investors, as shareholders, as advisors, as door openers, as brand ambassadors. And those people are the big majority. You know, there's millions of people out there who want to be part of the next Facebook or next Spotify years before they could be big, right? And that's very exciting for us to give a lot of people that opportunity. Of course, not every company will succeed. Not every company will become a unicorn, but some will. And if you're lucky enough and you can join those companies early on, that should be very lucrative and very rewarding, both financially and emotionally.
Brilliant. I think you mentioned very interesting points here, and something which kind of stuck in my mind was that you need to have a very strong why for building a startup. So if we were to ask, what's the strong why for FundedByMe? What does the company stand for? What does the idea stand for?
Well, we want to democratize the world of finance. We feel that it's unfair. Like, we put it like this: Sweden is the most modern and most equal country in the world, right? Or claims to, right? And I can put huge quotes on that. Yeah. Well, even in Sweden, it's extremely hard to get funding if you are female, if you don't live in Stockholm, if you are plus 40, if you have the wrong background. So none of these matters. None of these things matter if you're a good entrepreneur, if you have a good business idea. Suddenly you are a bunch of steps down on the stereotypical funding step just because you are different. And honestly, the next game changer will not come top down. It will come from the underground. It will come from a small city in Sweden, from Hong Kong, from Singapore, from Penang, from Malaysia. The world will be changed in a different way. And every game changer up until now was not seen as a game changer until they actually changed the game, right? And the problem is when you have a very few men sitting on huge piles of money and deciding what the next big thing is, that it's not democratic enough. So our why is that we want to fix this. We see an issue, it is fixable. The entrepreneurs want this tool, the potential investors want to be part of the next big thing. So our role is to make sure they can meet. So we built the site and we built the method, and we're trying to take this to the next step. We are right now the biggest in the EU. We have strong connections to Southeast Asia through Singapore and Malaysia, to Dubai, to Poland, to Finland, through our joint ventures there. And our why is that we want to fix this major problem, and we want to make it simple, natural, just part of the ecosystem, nothing quirky, nothing new, nothing strange.
It's a great idea, like democratizing access to funding. And when it comes to funding, is there now your experience, close to 10 years now with FundedByMe, and you're saying we are the largest in EU. Is there a particular stage of startup which is right for crowdfunding or on? So how does the stage of startup, and is there a particular focus in a startup, like a particular sector? So if you could address these two things, like stage and the sector focus.
Yeah, very good question. So the stage, I would say it has to be, if you want to do equity crowdfunding, which is allowing people to become shareholders in your company for the funding, you need to be at least beyond the idea stage, right? Then on the other hand, a lot of investors, they want to invest as early as possible. So they want to come in extremely early, when the valuation is low, when you just done your MVP or your first app, or you're just about to do that. Then of course, the earlier it is, the riskier it is, it's harder to get investors, but some investors want to come really, really early. We can do funding through FundedByMe all the way to IPO and also beyond. So basically, there's no real, in this day and age, there's no real stoppage on where you can't use crowdfunding, but it's more effective for early seed and especially growth. Growth is the best way. Like I've done a simple MVP. I tried it out on 1,000 or 10,000 customers. I know the ins and outs. I know how to take this to the next step. I need cash for that. That's the best thing. But I'm not shutting the door for early startups or growth startups or pre-IPOs, because we do a bunch of those too. What was your second question? Sorry.
In terms of sector, like for example, is it a great tool for, let's say, impact startup, or is it equally good for arts or fintech startups? Like,
very good
have
question.
You seen a pattern
somewhere? Yeah. So when people invest, they look at three things. One, do I think this is a sound investment? Will I get my money back? Times how much, right? The earlier you invest, the more return on your investment would you want at the end of the day. So that's one thing. Like, it has to make sense. It has to be scalable. I don't think, and I wouldn't want to claim that there's certain industries that can't use crowdfunding, because I'm the preacher of crowdfunding, right? And I believe that crowdfunding works for almost every company. It doesn't really work for companies who are in 15 years of R&D, or who need to work on stealth, but it works especially well for companies who can engage the audience. Food and beverages, tech apps, consumer products, e-commerce, retail, etc. But at the end of the day, I believe in the credo that every company in this day and age should work with their clients, and rather focusing on having fans instead of having customers. So by that definition, crowdfunding works for every company. It's almost like saying what sector doesn't fit well for funding. Well, there's always somebody who might like what you want. And if you work on a digital platform like ours on a global level, there's always going to be somebody who says, I love your idea, and somebody who doesn't get your idea. Those who don't get it, they don't like it, they won't invest. And those who like it, maybe they will invest, right? So at the end of the day, we think crowdfunding and FundedByMe is the huge democratizer, meaning that almost every company can present themselves, and then hopefully the audience find them investable.
Okay. Something which I get a lot as a startup coach when I'm meeting with founders, and especially with founders which are working on some novel idea. And if we take that as a reference point, how well do you, or how broadly you need to communicate your idea? Because a question that I get from these founders is it okay to share our ideas, or should we protect our ideas? So there's always a trade-off, like at an early stage startup level, when you have not really made a product and taken it out to the market, and you're looking for some early stage pre-seed funding or crowdfunding as a solution. How should founders or startup makers or entrepreneurs approach this? Should they be open with their ideas, like completely open, or what's your experience when you deal with companies?
Yeah, very, very good question. So first of all, there's a saying, there's no research behind this, but saying if you have a good idea, there's 100 people who also have that good idea right now. If you have a great idea, there's 1,000 people right now who are having that same idea. So execution is everything. It doesn't really matter if you have an awesome idea if you execute poorly. If you look at Spotify was not the first streaming service for music. Facebook was not the first social engine. Amazon is not the first e-commerce. Execution is the key to everything. That's the first thing that I'm saying here, meaning that you should definitely talk about your business. We live in a day and age where A lot of people make the mistake that they build and then they produce, and then once they got the shipment or the product done, they start chasing customers. I believe in building companies with your customers, with your fans. It's almost like a labor of love, almost like having a child. You talk about it for 9 months, right? You say, we're pregnant, we're going to have a kid. So you talk about it. You don't need to give away your ideas or your patents or your secrets, but you should definitely start drumming up interest if you are launching something in 6 months or 9 months or a year. That's part of the new way of building companies. If you look at the most successful companies out there, all the companies that you might like or anybody in this audience might like, what are they doing well in this day and age? Well, they are engaging their customers, right? And they're engaging them really early, and you as a customer, you feel a connectivity to your brand. Look at the Mac cult, like the Apple cult. Apple doesn't make the best computers in the world, but they have a cult following who's ready to pay premium price, including me. Look at any company out there. There's a cult following, either because it's simple, or because it's a low entry point, or because you feel connected to it. So I would answer your question by saying this: don't be afraid about anybody taking your idea, because the idea you're having, somebody else has that right now at the same point. But focus extremely on execution, on doing your milestone, making sure that every week, every day, every month counts. Take it forwards, do it properly, and do it properly in a way where you engage your customers early on. The earlier on you engage your customers, the easier it's going to be for you, and your customers is not going to feel like sheep. They're going to feel like brand ambassadors instead. One of my idols, Per-Jörgen Persson, who is a VC investor at Northzone, he has written a book called Heavy Metal Management, basically saying that work until your fans walk around with your t-shirt, almost like in a rock band, right? Metallica succeeded when people started to buy the Metallica t-shirt. That's what you should focus on, rather than being secretive. That's my opinion, at least.
I think great idea over there. And building on what you are saying, does that then mean, when you look at the campaigns that have come to you, some of them might have been rock star campaigns, some of them great campaigns, and some maybe not so great. What is the core factor, or let's say, what are the core differentiators between a great campaign and a good campaign, or a great campaign and not so good campaign? How do you differentiate what will succeed in crowdfunding in terms of?
Yeah, very good question. So first of all, after 10 years of working in crowdfunding, and I would say FundedByMe has an extreme knowledge in this field. Even us, we don't know what will succeed, and we shouldn't know. The thing is that what I'm trying to teach my team is that we should look at the sender and at the presentation rather than at the business idea. We will not know what the next game changer is, and those who claim they are naive. Next game changer will change everything, and it will change us in the core. So, but the difference in what succeeds, a good case versus a bad case, when you look at fundraising or crowdfunding, is 3 key elements. One, of course, are you understanding the investor? Is the investment opportunity good enough? A lot of people tend to focus on themselves. I need $1 million. I need to build a company. I need to take my company to the next step. But what does the investor want? How should they invest, and why? Think about, there's always choices. This investor has 1,000 choices. Should I invest in you or 1,000 other entrepreneurs? So should I take risk in you or go to the stock market? Should I buy a trip to New York and enjoy my family, or should I invest in your startup? So that's the first thing. Just understand the offering. Make sure that both you and the investor are in a happy place. That's, the best deal ever. The second one is energy. A lot of people who invest in the team, the founder, the execution probability. Can this team take this to the next step? Can they go from early naive kids all the way to the stock market and beyond? Can they execute? So a lot of people will invest in the team first, and then secondly in the product, and thirdly if there's a market, right? I've seen good companies fail because the entrepreneur is not hungry enough, even though everything was lined up perfectly. And third, of course, is energy and strategic continuity. Whatever you decide on, every day counts. Like a crowdfunding fundraising, a traditional fundraising, you have a lifespan of weeks to a few months, right? You need to make sure that everything happens in that period, that you keep up the momentum. Nobody wants to invest in somebody who doesn't answer emails or doesn't drum up interest or is not energetic enough. Like whatever company you build in this day and age, you need to be social, active, awake. So I would say when people fail on FundedByMe or when they fail on traditional fundraising, is because of these three elements. They're not attractive to enough for investors. So they forget about the investor opportunity. They are passive, or they can't take this to the next level. They think it's going to happen just because they wrote a business plan or whatever, right? And the third is that they don't stick to the plan. Either they decrease the activity or they start doing other things which become focus killers.
Okay. I really love when you put it social, active, and awake. I think those are very powerful words when you're trying to build a startup. Coming specifically to your platform, and because from what I hear, you're putting marketing, storytelling, clarity about the idea, drive as an entrepreneur as key winning factors in kind of communicating your idea to the world. Now, seeing your platform, what do you think is the ideal mix of a marketing focus for a startup when it comes to a platform like yours? Does the platform provide enough marketing exposure, or do they need to do a lot of off-platform work for their campaigns? Should they also be using social media? Are there any recommendations there when people come to your platform?
Yeah, so first of all, the first recommendation is, of course, to follow the rules and the laws. It's highly sensitive and highly illegal to market in certain countries investments in unlisted companies. So since the 1930s, there's rules and regulations which regulate how you can address the general market when you're fundraising. That's the first thing ever. And those rules are basically similar in all over the world, but then every country has regulations, limitations, or exemptions. So that's the first thing I would emphasize, that you can't just go up on Facebook and say buy shares. Like you have to be careful, sensitive, and use methods and tools which doesn't allow the general population to enter anything too easy. The other one is that never, ever, ever, whatever you do, rely on a platform or somebody else doing things for you. Like it doesn't matter if you are on a platform who has 100 million viewers each day if you're not active. Okay. The better the platform, the less visibility you might have because the traffic is higher and the distractions are higher. Like if you look at FundedByMe right now, we have 3 live cases, right? That's a balance that we're trying to keep. We could have 1,000 cases in theory, but that would kill the attention. So my answer is that you as an entrepreneur, you are the driver, you are the whip, you are the carrot of your own company. You need to make sure stuff happens. Obviously, platforms like ours have traffic. Obviously, platforms like ours have tools, methods, ideas, strategies on how to reach out more. But at the end of the day, everything you do in your company, and especially fundraising, shall and should rely on you. Some companies, though, have followers, have followings, or could have followers or followings if you expose your company well enough. So a lot of crowdfunding is about leveraging those networks. And the networks you are having are almost bigger than you think. But you need to dare to leverage them. You need to address them. You need to go out to these people and tell them what you're doing so they get excited, right? Okay. You are asking for money at the end of the day. Even if it's €100 or $100, it's still a lot of money you're asking for. You ask people to prioritize you instead of something else. So once again, it takes a lot of work, but any fundraising does. It takes a lot of work, but any business building does. The positives about crowdfunding is it's simple, it's cheap, it's effective, it's global, it's digital, it works 24/7, and also gives you real-time data. You can actually see in real time if a strategy is performing well or not. So you can see, for instance, that, okay, I did this push. What was the effect of it? Oh, I did this, but that wasn't any effect. So it gives you real-time data on how to deal with your strategy.
Okay, good. Coming back to the platform, and a specific question we at times get, and I think it'll be great to get your view on this. When you're starting a crowdfunding campaign, is it good to have, let's say, an X% or a small share of lead investors already with you, or can you start with a blank slate, a crowdfunding campaign? What do you say about that? And is there a threshold that a startup needs to have before they come into crowdfunding?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think having lead investors, anchors, a stamp of approval from somebody, an incubator or such, a startup grind or such, that's extremely valuable. We have data showing that if you're coming from an incubator or accelerator, if you have lead investors, the probability of succeeding increases by 34%. So
Okay.
we out of 30, 35 deals that we do per year, I would say 1 or 2 are starting at 0%. The majority, so FundedByMe works in 4 stages. One is the upcoming, the pre-hype. You are showing the market that you might do crowdfunding eventually, right? You start collecting interest. Then we have a private mode period where a campaign is live, but nobody can see it besides those who get the link. At that point, there's a timeline where lead investors can join or anchor investors can join or such. And then it opens to the public where everybody can check it out, but they need to go through some steps to actually see the financials, and they can commit. And only when a campaign hits 100%, the money is collected. And then we have what happens after the campaign, the closing down period and the settlement period. So the second step and the first step, the pre-hype, the upcoming, and the private mode are key elements for crowdfunding, definitely.
Okay. Let's also go into the second stage of steps when the crowdfunding campaign is running and is about to close and it closes. Like getting a lot of shareholders is a lot of work, I believe, and it could be overwhelming for companies. So what does a digital platform like FundedByMe do in that case? Like what kind of help startups get in terms of managing that new chunk of investors that have come in?
Yeah, very, very good question. So this is something that in a way, I'm not going to be rude to you now, Naimul, but this is a bit of an old misconception that it's hard to deal with a lot of shareholders. Yeah. And it was, and it could be, definitely. I'm not naive here, but let me change that. What do you rather prefer? 100 people who are investing in your company and ask you 100 questions, or nobody?
Okay, that's an interesting one.
Well, it's easy. Every entrepreneur wants momentum. Every entrepreneur wants a lot of things happening. There's a saying that you rather want too much wind in your sails than nothing. There's no worse thing for an entrepreneur than quietness, when nobody cares, nobody asks you questions. So having to answer questions for people who just invested in your company, who are excited, who want to help you, who want to open doors for you, who have ideas, obviously that's a positive, right? Yeah. Then the big question is, how do you deal with 100 investors? Well, we live in a day and age now where you have digital shareholder books. We recommend 2, e-aktiebok for Swedish companies or Capdesk. Capdesk is an international company where you deal with your shareholders. You communicate with all these people at one time digitally. You send them messages. You can put people in closed Facebook or LinkedIn groups where they discuss in between themselves. My answer to is that it is not hard to deal with many shareholders if you welcome that. It is not hard to have momentum if you welcome that. For me personally, and I think a lot of people like me, it's extremely psychological draining when nobody emails you, when nobody cares, when you are alone. I was in a position once when nobody opened the door, nobody emailed me, and I would rather have 1,700 shareholders as I have right now. But yes, of course, it's going to be overwhelming from time to time when a lot of people have a lot of questions. So how do you deal with that? Well, we have methods. The first method is that you need to communicate. You need to communicate. You need to communicate. And I'm going to say that one more time. You need to communicate. If you communicate to your shareholders group every 4 to 6 weeks and you do it properly in the fashion that investors want to hear, What are your challenges right now? What are your wins right now? What do you need help with right now? If you do those three every 4 to 6 weeks, people will be engaged and excited, and they won't be a burden. They will be rather a momentum, a bunch of door openers, and a bunch of brand ambassadors.
I think very interesting perspective, and I think it links to your point, which you were saying that on the startup side there needs to be energy. So even in investor management and communication, the startup needs to see it as an energetic exercise.
But you need you need that in your entire business. And I'm not meaning that only CEOs with ADHD can succeed, but the thing is that you are building something. You are taking steps forwards. And I've seen shy entrepreneurs and quiet entrepreneurs have momentum. It's not a personality trait. Nobody says that you should be flamboyant or extrovert or have like high energy, but you need to have momentum. And the thing is that some people will find you and they will invest in you and your company and your market. What they don't want is somebody who doesn't care or is passive or is slow or is not really answering emails in the right fashion. Like people, there's always choices. And as I mentioned before, whatever idea you have right now, somebody else has the same idea, if it's a good idea. And if it's a great idea, there's 1,000 people having the same. So what differentiates you between them is execution, regardless from where in the world you come or what gender you have or education or background. Execution is everything.
Got it. Jens, do we have the time for a couple of more questions? Or how do you suggest?
We have a number of questions also in the Q&A.
Okay.
So thank you very much for the very, very interesting fireside chat. One of the questions.